Welcome to the Call Center Crew podcast, where we educate, empower, and help you execute in the everyday grind that is contact center. We bring you the expertise and success from industry professionals around the world. Listen in or watch weekly every Wednesday at callcentercrew.com. Hey everybody, welcome to the Call Center Crew podcast. I'm your host, Landon Rich, coming to you again from Northern Utah. Both mine and our guest today, Jacob Bentley, our stomping grounds here at Focus Services. Jake, thanks for coming on the show.
I appreciate you having me.
So before we jump into everything, guys, please, if you're listening to this on the audio version on iTunes or Google Play, you can also find the video version over on YouTube or callcentercrew.com, as well as all the other content that we put out, our Monday metrics, as well as our weekly wisdom. So go ahead, follow us there, and we'd love to hear your feedback. So let's jump right in, guys. Jacob Bentley. So give us some background on how you got into the call center world, your background in operations, and then kind of what you're doing today, and then we'll jump into our topic.
Absolutely. Well, I've been in call centers and call center operations pretty much my adult life. I'm 23 right now. As soon as I turned 18, I came fresh out of the military and was looking for a job close to home, and I started at Focus Services on their Centrelink residential floor.
Awesome.
And that's where it all started. Just, the grind, taking the calls every single day. Mm-hmm. And my supervisor got me really engaged. I thought it was going to be just one of those 6-month jobs till I find something better.
Yep.
But then he started teaching me how to develop the agents, identify the data, read the trends, do the goals and everything, and it really sparked my interest. So after about 6 weeks of dialing on the phone, I moved up and I was a mentor for one of our new hire teams. Glorified babysitter, really at Focus, run around, answer the questions so the supervisor and the coaches can actually get their job done.
Yep.
I did that for probably about another 3 weeks, and I had the opportunity to apply for a coaching position, and I got it. And that's really where everything took off from there. It's really rewarding to sit down with agents and identify their breaking points, figure out how you need to work with each person, and then see them get better and develop them into leaders in the industry, whether that's they move on somewhere else and hold a management position or a position of responsibility, or move up within the company too.
Yeah. But I'm going to stop you right there. So before we go on in how, you moved up into a supervisor and into some leadership positions, you described similar to my kind of entering the call center industry, as well as I think the majority of all other call center agents. And I think I'm safe to say this, especially here in the United States, but everywhere, Philippines, Central America, is people go into the call center space as definitely not a career. They don't look at it as a career, right? They're like, hey, it's a stepping stone. It's going to get me some income, fast income right away, paid training. And then, I'll just find something better, right? Or maybe it's a job that, puts me through school or puts me through a certain, course, and then I'm out of here, right? And then, but what some people find, you and myself included, and many others, is, we find out that we're good at it, right? That we enjoy it, and yeah, we're good at it. We excel at certain portions of it. So, lo and behold, 5 years later, 9 years later, we're still in the industry, and we're off and running. So I think that's important to point out that, for those that may be listening and they're like, holy cow, I'm still on the phones. It's been 6 months. I'm struggling, or whatever it may be. It only takes a supervisor or a certain change in campaign or whatever it may be, and they take off. They take off. So. So let's jump back in. So your supervisor now, take us through kind of that first. So after that first promotion into a coach or that leadership position, from there, kind of maybe did you switch any campaigns, different call types? What were the things that you managed?
So as a supervisor, most of my time as a coach was spent on the same campaign, the residential one for Centrelink. Really the only thing that varied in there is I kind of made a name for myself of fixing the teams that were kind of in a slump. So I never actually got to really hold down a team and have like a tenured vet team. I would bounce around probably every 2 to 3 months, go to the next team, get them where they need to be, go to the next team, get them where they need to be. I didn't make my first actual campaign switch until I was able to take the next step and get into a site lead at Focus, which is kind of their workforce management role, tracking the attendance, adherence, and everything like that. I was able to move over to our Central Ogden site, where I spent the next couple of years, as a matter of fact. From there, I worked in a lot of different roles and positions inside that on the same campaign. Like I said, starting out with that one.
Now, was that a different campaign? But what was the call type? Is it still inbound? Was it still sales? Was it?
Absolutely. The call type was still inbound, but we switched to more of a sales. It was the .com project that they used to run out of there. So whenever a customer was having issues signing up online, they didn't get their address right, or they needed to double check the speeds in the area, it'd give them our number, they would come in. So it was a very, very high energy campaign. We would see a lot more sales come through that one than we would typically see in the residential one over at the Roy office.
Awesome. So you sparked my interest. So you say you bounced around. Was it mostly new hires? Was it, you mentioned struggling teams, obviously struggling with performance, but was it due to, why were they struggling with performance? Was it because they had some high attrition? Was it, due to the fact that they didn't have the right supervisor at the time? Or walk us through kind of, why were they struggling, and then how did you fix it? What were some of the key things that you did in those 2 to 3 months that really turned around the team and helped them perform and excel at the calls they were taking?
Absolutely. The biggest thing that I noticed when I went into a team like that was a loose process where they would follow the general guidelines, but you wouldn't be down to the T. You wouldn't be doing every step that you need to take into there. And when you get loose in your process, people take advantage of that. They find the shortcuts. They do what they can. So really all it was is I would come in, I would figure out where those misses were, and then just get them back on track, consistent process. The biggest thing that I found helped with that is consistent follow-ups with your people. If you say it's going to be every Tuesday at 2 o'clock, you make sure every Tuesday at 2 o'clock you're sitting down with them, you're going over their numbers, and you're helping them identify if they're getting better, worse, or in between. And a big part of it was really sitting down and getting their buy-in, figuring out why they thought it was bad or why they thought it was good. There's a saying that's seek to understand before being understood. I think that really, really applies here. You can look at someone else's data and bark orders at them and tell them they need to do X, Y, Z all day long. But if you don't have their buy-in, it's just noise to
Toast. Them. Yep. Yeah, definitely. So taking a step back, the processes that you were talking about, what were some of those processes? If you can elaborate a little bit on, what was broken, and because I definitely agree that that's a very core principle that, process and systemic process drives results, right? It's good to have goals, but really that system, day in and day out, no matter the environment, no matter the call type, I think that's having a strong process and a systematic approach to things is always drives some success. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Just kind of started with making the day predictable. I would have a whiteboard, and every single day, if you ended up on 0 or you missed one of our performance objectives for a KPI, your name was on the board for a follow-up, so everyone knew every day that that's what to expect. If I see my name up there, I'm either going to have a meeting or I know I need to do a little bit better today. After a while of that, most of the time they would come to me and say, okay, what do I need to fix? What do you see about my numbers yesterday? The second part of it actually was really pushed down from the regional director that we had at the time, Lindsay Simmons. You're familiar with her, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know Lindsay.
She was real big into making sure everyone had their SMART goals, and that was kind of tying into the weekly follow-ups that I mentioned, making sure they knew what they were working on, making sure they knew their lead and their lag, their leads being the behavior that they need to demonstrate on each and every individual call, and the lag, which is going to be the result of them performing that behavior, their step-by-step plan of what they need to do every day to accomplish that goal, very clear consequences, whether they're positive or negative, what happens if they accomplish or fail that goal, and having that set deadline saying, Tuesday, 3 o'clock it's time's up. It's do or die.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's funny that you mentioned I've been driving on almost every piece of content, all the podcast episodes, almost all the podcast episodes, and then all the other, Metric Mondays. I always talk about lead metrics versus lag metrics. And I think, that obviously comes directly from the 40X, the 4 Disciplines of Execution book, which, goes over more in depth on those and even more principles. But that's definitely following driving the lead metric, which will then result in better performance in the lag metric. I drive that. That's probably the number one thing that I drive and try to instill in everybody, right? Like you said, from agents all the way to supervisors, all the way up to the executives, everybody has a lead metric that feeds into a lag that then would roll up to basically a WIG, right? Wildly important goal,
Exactly.
which is at the top. So I think that's great. Great principles there. So let's dive into. I want to talk about quality. So you as a supervisor over a team, and now you mentioned most of your tenure was spent as a site lead. So workforce optimization, dealing with efficiency metrics, utilization, everything from service level, things like that. Walk us through what you did from that level to ensure that the campaign was hitting their SLAs. Obviously, you might not have any direct. Well, and maybe you do. I'll just turn it over to you. I'll let you. I'll let you explain what you did as a site lead.
Yeah, absolutely. And a big part of it that made us successful down in Ogden is we had a really good co-site lead, I guess. Israel, you know Izzy.
Yep.
He made things very easy. I would cover AMs, he would cover PMs, and there's just once again having that process, having that consistency. Every day you would review the SLA objectives, your main KPIs that were related to your workforce, and any of them that were outside of objective, we broke it down into our 10-80-10s. We would look at our top 10%, our median 80%, and then our bottom 10%. Our bottom 10% had a one-on-one every single day for those individual KPIs, whether it was they went over break on a day, they didn't generate enough productive time, their average handle time was out of code. Another big thing with that is following the rules and following the rules for everyone, really. 7 minutes after your shift starts is late. There's no exceptions. So we would have a point tracking system that went along with that one, and just keeping it consistent across the board, not playing favorites and not giving that exception to the rules just because you might be in a tight spot at the given moment. You might be hurting a little bit on staffing. So you might call back a couple agents that didn't have very good attendance or didn't have very good performance for you because you needed it right then and there. But I'm a big proponent of short-term sacrifice, long-term gain. Once they got to see that, if I mess up or I'm outside of these objectives and I'm gone, I have to stay gone, it really started to change things over there and drive a lot of consistency.
I love that. I've seen that in the Philippines. I've seen that, and I think that is one of the largest pitfalls that people fall into. Is they understand they've got clients that are holding them to, and they may very well have contractual agreements where if they violate or they miss an SLA, that affects their bill rate, right? So it affects not only their bottom line, but it's that whole, the devil and the angel, right? Is, do I miss service level and therefore miss revenue and miss a contractual agreement I have with my client? Or do I call people back and hit those service levels, but it ultimately affects the morale? It affects the trust. What about the people that came to work day in and day out every day, and they see a person get fired for poor attendance and then called right back, right? It just sets that precedence that it takes a very, very long time to gain that trust back and to change what people view you as a supervisor, as a company. And so it's definitely back and forth. Do I hit service level? Like you said, short sacrifice, or do I look for the bigger gain? So I think that's huge. That's massive. Yeah, I think if people can wrap their heads around that, it may hurt short term, but in the long run, you're going to have agents that stick around longer. They trust you more, and they're going to perform better for you.
Absolutely. When you think about it that way, just the benefits outweigh the cost in so many extra areas. You'll get just a happier and more fun culture. because they don't see that double standard. People will start to stay longer, so you're not spending as much money training people in, replacing that attrition. Then you have more money to wrap into their incentives, which just comes right back around, makes the culture better, makes them happier. They come to work, and it's an upward spiral.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. So from site lead, where did you go from site lead? And then if that leads into what are you doing currently today inside of the contact center space?
Absolutely. Site lead, I spent about 9 to 8 months doing that one. Then I had the opportunity to kind of move into a multi role. We were kind of short staffed. We made some changes in our management. So I took over the subject matter expert, process administration, as well as kind of an assistant director role.
Very nice.
So
many hats.
Yeah. And that one, that was really got me out of my comfort zone to what I was used to up to that point. It's because a lot of the process administration was trying to cover those what if scenarios and those one-offs, and not so much, it was black and white. You either did or you didn't do it. You were here, you weren't. Really expanded my horizons and helped me grow and learn to cover those situations.
Now, was that on the same campaign over in COG?
Absolutely.
Right?
That one I was still in COG. I spent a while there. Actually, was with Marcy, as you might know. I think you had her a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, Marcy was
right?
on the episode or on the podcast last week, actually. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was working with Marcy there, and that was all the way until August of 2 years ago, where my former director, Taylor Hughes, he just kind of showed up at Ogden one day and he said, we just brought on a new campaign, the charter campaign for focus services. It's going to be big, and they're going to need a kind of a co-director for that campaign. So he reached out to me with the opportunity, and I moved over there and spent the last couple years with Focus working with that. That was a whole another monster. I'd never dealt with something that was that different from the Centrelink campaigns before.
Mm-hmm. But it did the same. Now, let's explain what was so different about it, and then did the same principles that you were able to take teams over a 2 to 3 month period and absolutely turn them around. Did those same principles apply to not only the Centrelink floor but also to this charter floor?
Absolutely. The same basic foundation applied to everything. The biggest difference between those two is my reporting tool changed. We were using Clearview always on Centrelink, and I kind of ended up taking it for granted. Moving to Charter, we switched over to the Avaya reporting tool, which was just massive data dumps, and then you had to put all your formulas into Excel to format it and create those metrics that you wanted to see in there. Mm-hmm. So it was a little bit slower start getting into Charter, starting that process and really applying those core concepts, because I didn't have the data that needed to go along with it. I couldn't measure leads. I couldn't measure lags. So.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And, for those listening and watching, Jake was mentioning Clearview, which if you refer back to, I believe it was episode 4 of the Call Center Crew podcast, we had Jaden Minkum on from Clearview, and he dives in deeper of what Clearview is, and you'll be able to, if you refer back to that show, you can dive in and learn exactly what Jacob is talking about when he says, he took for granted the ability to have that data in his fingertips with one campaign, and then how hard it was to then manage a different campaign without having that visibility, right? So we're not going to dive too much into it on this episode. I'm going to refer you back to episode 4 of the Call Center Crew podcast, callcentercrew.com or YouTube, and you can dive more into that. So I think that's a good point, though. I think let's talk about that, and then we can wrap up. Reporting and the tools you used. How did that play a factor, and what were some of the tools that you used outside of, you mentioned Clearview. Did you use any other types of software, or how did you manage and operate the calling floor that you were on the last?
So through that one, most of it actually came from the Avaya and just big data dumps. So my reporting tools just went from having all these different options, the summaries, the intervals, historical data ports, a year back if I wanted to go, to basically one day at a time compiling data over and over and over and squashing it into an Excel sheet and hunting down that one broken formula, if anything.
Right. And how delayed was that? So you mentioned day. So if I wanted to hold, if you wanted to hold an agent accountable for today's numbers, could you view that, or did you have to wait till tomorrow to be able to view that that data?
For the most part, you would have to wait till the next day. You could update reportings periodically throughout the day, but there was latency, there was a lag, there was a call that just wasn't there that should be there. Mm-hmm. So anything that happened that day, you would have to try and backpedal and correct any bad behaviors from the previous day the next day. And it was just always playing catch up with that one.
Yep, definitely. And what are you doing today? Before we wrap up, what are you doing today? And how do you stay involved in the call center space?
Absolutely. So now I'm actually I've left the focus team. I'm over at Clearview, and I'm the onboarding department manager. Really just the way that I'm staying involved in the call center is once the client's gone through, they're up and running, they're ready to go with the system, I'm there to kind of use my expertise with the system and my experience to not only train them on it, but show them the use cases and the best practices on how to run their business using the Clearview tool.
Excellent. Yeah, taking what you learned over the past 5 years and then applying it, helping those other maybe the same people that may have been using big data dumps like you were explaining on your last campaign, making the transition over into what is the better reporting, right?
Absolutely.
So just to wrap up, again, I don't want to. This isn't a knock on any one company or any one software, but the principle itself inside of contact center operations is you have to have visibility to your data, right? At the agent level, at the supervisor level, at the company level, you have to have data. Jacob's talked about it a lot today. If he didn't have that real-time visibility, there's no way that he would have been able to do daily one-on-ones, knowing, right? If you didn't know what your agent's metrics were, right? There's so many things that go into play that you have to have visibility into your data to be able to manage your business. That's the key principle here in operating a call center at the floors that you did. Jacob, if people want to find you, how do they get a hold of you? LinkedIn, what's some places they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn's probably going to be your first stop. It's just Jacob Bentley, Bentley, just like the car. So
cool.
If you need anything, you have questions, comments, concerns, you want me to take a look at something, I'm always more than happy to. Go ahead and send me a direct message.
Excellent. Well, guys, thanks again for tuning in. This is the Call Center Crew podcast. Again, you can find us across all of the podcast apps, iTunes and Google Play, as well as on YouTube, and all the rest of our content on callcentercrew.com. Just like Jacob said, any questions about outsourcing, call center operations in general, or just how to get better at being an agent, being a supervisor, and being an executive inside of the contact center world, give us a shout, callcentercrew.com. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day, guys.